All right, when Democrats lose elections, they blame everyone besides themselves. Take, for example, Stacey Abrams, remember?
I'm here to tell you that just because you win doesn't mean you're won. I come from a state where I was not entitled to become the governor.
Yeah, remember that? But this isn't anything new for the Democratic Party. It's right, seemingly, out of Hillary Clinton's playbook, 2016.
I believe he knows he's an illegitimate president. He knows that there were a bunch of different reasons why the election turned out the way it did.
Really, let's expand on that. They love to tell you that democracy is dying and the Republicans won't accept losing. But in reality, they're the ones who are killing it. We're learning this from John Durham's investigation, who last month indicted Clinton campaign attorney Michael Sussmann for lying to the FBI while pushing a phony investigation into Trump's ties to a Kremlin-linked bank. What's key about that? Sussmann's worked for the Clinton campaign. He didn't tell the FBI where he was coming from. But now, new reporting from Real Clear Politics shows that the Clinton campaign also tried to pressure President Obama's State Department and the CIA into investigating. Yeah, even while the Trump's White House term was underway. So they lost the election and tried to screw up the administration. And while they're doing that, they're undermining America's trust in our government. And I think you know that. Joining us now is Fox & Friends Weekend co-host Pete Hegseth, Mr. Everything. Pete, this is very interesting. Paul Sperry has this interesting revelation. So Sussmann gets indicted, and people say, well, what's the big deal? Who's Michael Sussmann? Tell us why we should care about this next wrinkle in this investigation.
Well, it turns out, as you laid out, Michael Sussmann was just one piece of an all-out blitz from the Clinton campaign, straight from the Clinton campaign. It was not just the FBI. It was their mothership, the DOJ. It was the State Department. It was the CIA. They were running false stories that they knew were false about Trump's ties to a Russian bank, because what was happening at the same time, Brian? Hillary Clinton's email scandal was raging, so they needed something else. So they ran these false stories about Donald Trump's business interests in Russia, and they didn't need any of it to be true, Brian, and you know this, and this is laid out by Sussmann. They just needed an investigation that could then be reported upon. Right. So a reported investigation, which feeds a news cycle, which then the investigators use as justification, and it's a big dust cloud they used to try to turn Donald Trump into a Russian agent. It was cynical enough they did it before. They continued it after the campaign. And this information we're getting now shows how widespread it really was. It wasn't one person. It wasn't just Christopher Steele. It just wasn't just Michael Sussmann. If John Durham does his job, he could uncover a whole web here.
So you had multiple people coming up to the FBI and CIA saying, this Donald Trump, he's hooked up with Russia. They have, for example, this secret hotline, they say, between Moscow through a Russian bank. The Trump camp, the Trump business has a secret hotline. Well, it turns out the hotline was a marketing arm, and they knew it. They knew it was a red herring, but they used that as more indications, leaking that story to the press to let people think there's a secret Russian plot between the Trump campaign, then the Trump presidency, and Russia. And the damage it did to this country and that administration is unquantifiable.
They don't care about the damage, Brian. They wanted the White House. And they didn't care about the damage to the office of the presidency for 4 years as they continued it. The word you used, red herring, Brian, is the exact word in the document as described by folks pushing the conspiracy theory by Hillary Clinton. They looked at the email address. They knew it was specious. They knew it was tied to marketing. They knew it wasn't a real hotline to Russia. They didn't care. They knew their buddies in the media would continue the narrative, and all they wanted was enough to try to push it across the finish line for them. It didn't work, thankfully. But when they talk about democracy dies in darkness, how many days, how many minutes, how many columns have been spent at the Washington Post or the New York Times covering this? Very, very little. It's been Fox News, talk radio, and real investigative journalists who have uncovered this, and it's going to have to be.
Absolutely. And there's something else. So that was 2016. Then we see 2020. You had an administration who was just tarred by this for the 4 years, a distraction for the country. But now we're in looking at 2022. But first off, on a midterm election, without a lot of thrilling races, but one everyone's fixated on is the governorship in Virginia. Terry McAuliffe is supposed to walk to victory. Check out this poll, Pete. We got it 1 hour ago. Glenn Youngkin has a 8-point lead over Terry McAuliffe. Look at the difference since October. It was 51-46. Now it's 53-45 among Virginia likely voters. What do you think is the reason?
Turns out parents believe they should be in charge of their child's education, and it turns out people who've spent their life in government usually don't deliver on the promises you want in your community. They're more interested in, say, a bill being delivered for their benefit in Washington, D.C., which has since failed. Terry McAuliffe is the personification of Joe Biden in Virginia. He's been a part of that complex. Nobody knew who Youngkin was before this started, but he dialed into Virginia issues, listened to Virginia parents, and it's not a Republican thing to believe parents should steer their child's education. It's an independent thing and even a moderate Democrat thing. They better watch the polls. Voter integrity will be important, but a lead like this is significant in the state of Virginia, no doubt.
Absolutely, Pete. And the other thing to keep in mind, he had zero surrogates, none. He says, I'll do it, win or lose, it's going to be me. Do you know if Terry McAuliffe loses, you know who else loses? Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Stacey Abrams, Jill Biden, all put their personal credibility on the line for Terry McAuliffe. They all lose, and they go down with the ship. Pete, I imagine, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but you call me all the time to ask me, but I'll say that might be a topic over the weekend. And if you do call me again on Friday, that's what I'll tell you. And I'll tell Will, too.
You know, Brian, you know what might be a topic? Speaking of losing, you're going to lose your specious lawsuit against Bret Baier for walking and standing. I'm joining him in an amicus brief.
This is true.
Will Cain will be my representative, maybe Todd Pyro, maybe Emily Campagno, my team of lawyers. If you look at where you're standing right now, Brian, in that Studio M, that is Pete's place, labeled as such.
It is.
I'm joining Bret Baier's fight against you. Your standing tyranny will end.
I cannot believe how I exposed myself just to show a variety to the viewer. I've exposed myself legally, but I'm standing at Pete's place almost as an homage to you, but instead it's blown up in my face. Pete, you can take the gel out. You are done with TV for tonight.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.